me what you don't like about yourself. 8 immortal words that introduce us to one of the most iconic and daring television shows of the 2000s. On this very day, 20 years ago, the 22nd of July, 2003, they were first uttered on FX by Dylan Walsh, who played one half of plastic surgery duo McNamara Troy alongside Julie McMahon on Nip Tuck. It was a show that would go on to air 100 episodes over 7 years, winning countless awards, including the Golden Globe for Best Drama in 2004, and breaking boundaries on a variety of topics and taboos never before covered on mainstream TV. It was also the show that fully set the icon that is Ryan Murphy into the television landscape, bringing audiences his unique style that has become a staple in mainstream television and led to some of the most popular and groundbreaking shows over the last 2 decades. And to help celebrate the iconic show on this iconic day, it is an honor to be able to bring together 4 actors who helped cement the legacy of Nip Tuck over the years. Now, between them, they appeared in 88 of the 100 episodes across all 6 seasons, and each brought their own unique impact on the legacy of Nip Tuck. And 2 of them today are making their debut on this very show, the Oz Network. So without further ado, let's bring them in, and we're going to go in order from the total number of episodes that they appeared on the show. I'm going to start with a woman who appeared on 6 episodes across 4 seasons, playing the lovable plastic surgery addict, Mrs. Hedda Grubman. I'm just going to call her Mrs. Grubman because, let's be honest, that's what we knew her as. It's a pleasure to welcome Ruth Williamson. Ruth, first of all, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. It's very nice to be here. I'm glad you're doing this.
It's an honor to be able to speak with you today to help celebrate this occasion. Also making her Oz Network debut today, appeared in 7 episodes across season 5, playing Hearts and Scalpels actress Kate Tinsley. Pleasure to welcome to the show Paula Marshall. Paula, thanks for joining us.
Hi. Glad to be here.
I'm so glad that you're here as well. I've got so many questions. Season 5, it's a fun season. We've got plenty to cover around that as well. And 2 other guests, one who will be joining us very shortly, but our next guest, no stranger to the Oz Network and definitely no stranger to Nip Tuck fans. 10 episodes across 4 seasons he appeared in. He played the iconic drug lord, villain, 80s music obsessed guy, Oscar Gallardo. It's a pleasure to welcome back to the Oz Network, Robert LaSardo. Robert, I feel like I need to play Cars by Gary Newman right now. I think that's just in your contract every time you make an appearance. Robert, welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you.
I got through all of that, didn't I think? And we'll be joined by very, very shortly another returning guest who I'm pretty sure all Nip Tuck fans will know and love. But guys, I'm going to start off with the basic question. 20 years of Nip Tuck. Here we are, 20 years ago on this very day the show premiered. I'm going to start with you, Robert, because you alongside Ruth were in that pilot episode that aired on this day. Talk to me right now. 20 years, is it hard to believe that it's been that long since the show premiered?
Yeah, when you bring up that number, it doesn't calculate. Like, I can't believe it's that long.
It's crazy to think.
Yeah.
Crazy to think that it has been that long. And Ruth, too, you were in that very premiere pilot episode as well. For you, 20 years of this show.
I remember it vividly. I had to get out of a play I was doing in Los Angeles in order to shoot the pilot, and I took the train down to San Diego. We shot it in San Diego, and nobody really knew what they were doing. It was so new. And I remember, Julian and Jolie both were just like, we don't know what we're doing. We have no idea who we are or what we're playing. They were so cute, and we all just bonded because we were going to try to make something good. Damn it, it was the last thing we ever did, and we had a really good time.
Yeah, the rest.
I was in one tiny scene, but it blossomed into something great. So.
Oh, we'll touch on that. That one tiny scene definitely set that character into the stratosphere. Paula, for you, obviously you joined a little bit later. Season 5 you were in, and we'll touch on sort of how you all got in the show at that point. But had you watched Nip Tuck sort of before you were cast? Were you familiar with it essentially before you ultimately were on the show?
Oh, yeah, I watched. And when I got the audition, I was like, oh, because it's an established show and those are kind of hard to get into. So when I got the audition, I was thrilled. It was only later that I read, and I think I had to cry. Maybe there were 3 or 4 scenes. You guys know when you cry and you have a couple scenes and it's hard enough to just walk in the room and pretend you're doing stuff with no one, just the reader. It's hard. So I had to cry. I thought I killed it. And I remember leaving and going back to my car. And then I got a call from my agent that said, Ryan Murphy wants you back. I'm like, oh my God, what did I do? I guess I did a good job. And he had to talk to me about a couple things that the character would go through to see if I was game. And I immediately said no. I was like, no, I'm not doing that. And then my agents were like, no, Paula, you're totally going to do it. Ryan Murphy. I'm like, no, I'm too vain. I'm not doing that. And I did it anyway. So there you go.
I got to bring that up. Just you brought it up, Paula. You know I'm going to mention it. That wouldn't happen to be a certain defecating in a jacuzzi scene, would
jacuzzi.
it? Mm.
It was dirt and Coca-Cola. I just want to, burst the bubble.
Stop it. Wait a minute. I'm back up. That was you.
That was me. And let me tell you something. I have this one friend.
That's iconic. Right? That's an iconic scene.
But literally, I think I've seen it once. And if you look closely, you see me laughing. And I was saying to Ben that, like, I told them I'm going to do 2 takes and I'm done and I'm moving on because I'm not doing this anymore. But again, I almost didn't do the show because of that. And because of the other, like, reveal with the body, I'm like, oh no. Carly Simon was not talking about me when she said Warren Beatty it was me. It wasn't Warren Beatty. I'm very, very vain, especially back then when I was like 30 or 28 or whatever I was. So I'm really surprised I did it because, that's not easy to do. It's just feels so ridiculous.
Well, you saw that reaction straight away there from Ruth, that even now it's a scene that people remember. So, I mean.
Shocking. I'm sorry, Ruth. I'm sorry to bring that back.
I love that.
God.
I remember everybody in the.
I think that entertainment in itself is pretty ridiculous.
Yeah, I think that speaks to the nature of the show, though, that there are so many scenes that even after all these years that are memorable. I mean, one scene that we talked a lot about when we covered all the episodes of the show that went very iconic was the episode in which Julian's character, of course, Christian Troy, had sex with a woman by putting a paper bag on her head, which obviously went on to a variety of different moments and memes. I mean, we can talk a lot about that throughout this episode in terms of just things like that. But to just bring it back to that pilot and sort of, Ruth, what you were talking about none of you sort of knowing what you're doing. Do you remember, I'll start with you, Ruth, with this, when you got that script before you were even on set and kind of your initial thoughts of when you read this show, this brand new show called Nip Tuck?
Wow. I'm trying to think if I even got the whole script. I don't think I did. I really don't.
Right.
I really don't think I got the whole. I might have, but I just remember. I remember the audition, and I remember I ad-libbed in the audition. And so I kept it when we shot the scene. When he says, come on in, Mrs. Grubbin, and my favorite patient, and I'm like, I should say that to everybody, and it sort of gave him a little. I think I patted him on the ass or something. I don't know.
You got to do that with Julian, though, right? That's just like that natural. You just kind of like, you're there and you're like, let's do it. Come on.
Right. Well, he and I got along like a house on fire. We really liked each other and had a good chemistry, and realized that really, as we learned over the course of the seasons, Dr. Troy and Mrs. Grubman were not so different. Both of them were horrible narcissists and would do almost anything to make themselves look good. And I mean that not only physically, but in every conceivable way.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they recognized that in each other. And through the course of and finally, when in the scene where at the end, when I die and he gives my eulogy, he talks about that, about how we weren't so very different, were we?
Yeah, exactly. I should mention we'll bring in our next guest into the show just now, but I'm actually I'm speaking to 2 ghosts today because 2 of your characters do pass away in the show. So it's always good to be able to bring back those those spirits onto the show. But I'm going to bring in, and we'll come back to you, Robert, of course, around that question about reading for the very first time, because I'm going to bring in our next guest here on the show, somebody who has appeared on this show as well, also in the pilot. one of our main four beloved stars of the show when he comes in. I want to make sure that I'm getting the introduction there. There he is. I'm seeing him right now. John, I've got to quickly give you your introduction here because I wrote this out for you to give you a big head. You appeared in 65 episodes of the show. As I said, one of the four main cast members credited in all 100 episodes. You played the lovable, but let's say unlucky son of both Sean and Christian, McNamara. Pleasure to welcome back to the show, Mr. John Hensley. John, I got there. Welcome to the 20th anniversary of Nip Tuck.
You got there. It's a pleasure to be here, Ben. I can't believe you're taking the time to do this. This is super cool, man. This is really cool.
Well, it's exciting, and I love now being able to stare at all of your wonderful faces. As I said to you off air, you've all not aged a day. You're all looking fantastic. And I also love the fact that we can all come here to celebrate this show as well. John, we were just touching with Ruth and was going to throw to Robert as well about when you first got that script for the pilot, because obviously three of you there were in that pilot. So I'll come back to you in just a second with that, John. Robert, yourself, do you have memories of getting that script for the pilot and reading for Escobar Gallardo for the first time?
It's pronounced Gallardo, by the way.
Thank you.
Gallardo, Escobar Gallardo. And first of all, I want to say, hey, John, it's good to see you, man.
It's very good to see you too, sir. Absolutely.
Good to see you, brother.
Hi, John.
Very good to see you too. Hey, how are you? It's so good to see all of you. This is wild. Yeah.
So the question, okay, so honestly, Ben, it wasn't like any different than any other audition. I think I received sides. I went in. I had worked with Michael Robbins before on NYPD Blue. So I was familiar with him as a producer. I didn't know who Ryan was. I read for him. And the feedback was that Ryan wanted me for the job, and then also that he was terrified for some reason when I came into the room. I don't know why, but apparently I was effective in what I did. So there's that part of it. And then when we did the pilot, prior to Nip Tuck, because you got to remember something. None of us, at least I didn't have any idea the kind of impact the show would make. So for me, it just felt like, familiar territory in terms of this kind of nefarious, scary guy, involved in drug trade, torturing someone with a little bit of humor in there. So it was everything prior to that, I think, was kind of a training ground, boot camp for me to be ready for the ultimate fight. But I had no idea it was a heavyweight championship in terms of the impact that it would make on the society and television, that it would be this phenomenon. So I just went in like I always do, fully committed. I thought some of the material was well written. I liked, working with the other actors. I felt a rapport with everyone, and the scenes worked well. And then the next thing I know, I think I figured out in late time what I had done. It was almost like everything I do. I black out when I'm there. I immerse myself in character. And then in retrospect, I look at this thing and I go, oh, that's what we did? And people later on would tell me, do you even realize the impact of this thing? People from FX would meet me in Santa Monica on the street. People I didn't even know would come up to me. This is going to be a game change for you, LaSardo. I'm like, what is? The show. I work for FX and we've seen it. And so there was this kind of like this foreshadowing of things to come that I felt outside of, because I was so always immersed in the work itself that I didn't consider any of these things, until a few years later, after I was off the show, I suddenly realized, well, okay, there was something to this. But while I was doing it, honestly, I didn't really look at it that way. I just seemed to be another job. I was grateful for the work. And when I worked with Ryan and some of the other actors, I felt privileged because I could sense at least that I was in presence of professionals, very insightful, creative people who took the material serious. And they appreciated me. When I worked with, I did a couple of scenes with John. I just felt a chemistry and a sense of belonging that felt different than some of the sets I'd been on. And I remember Ryan coming up to me and I gave him a kiss on the cheek. He was very sweet to me, very kind. Not every producer's like that. Some of them lord their power over you. And people are very frightened. They tiptoe on the set. I didn't feel that way. I felt at home in that circumstance. So that's how I remember it.
What a great summary. That's fantastic. I love hearing all of that. John, follow that. I don't know if you can.
I don't know that I can. I don't know that I can. I was really loving listening to that. And sort of similarly, I don't, I've always wondered this about people when they work on things. I've never, how do I say this? Anything that has, that I've been a part of, I've only been able to sort of, appreciate's not the right word, but I guess sort of understand it in retrospect. I'm sort of much the same way. Like I feel very fortunate anytime I get the opportunity to do this stuff. And I never really, I'm just sort of simple in that way. I don't really think much past it, and really, quite frankly, throughout the entire run of Nip Tuck, I mean, the one thing I know is, and this sort of gets, I guess, back to your initial question, Ben, is that I'm gonna try to tell this story quickly and without being too self-indulgent. I've already stumbled enough in speaking about it. But right before the pilot script for Nip Tuck came my way, this was like, obviously back in the day where like scripts would show up on your doorstep in manila envelopes and all of that good stuff. And like literally 2 days before that, I had a conversation with my manager at the time about, because I was already almost in my mid-20s. I was like 24, and I had, sort of done things in my life before I ever got involved, in, I guess, storytelling, and I cowboyed in Wyoming, and I'd grown up as a kid in Kentucky, and I'm actually here in Kentucky right now on a trip with my daughter, and we. And I was a bit of I was a kid who was really sort of driven by fear and insecurity, which led to, a few overnight stints and a few appearances before local judges and all that good stuff. So I felt as a young guy, I thought, God, I've lived a little bit of life, and I don't want to play the teenage kid anymore. And then literally 2 days later, the script for Nip Tuck showed up. And I read the pilot script, and I thought, this is far and away the best, certainly, piece of television I'd ever had the opportunity to read. I thought the script was just truly incredible. And so I decided, this shows how just silly I was. I was like, well, I'll go in and but I'm not going to audition. I'm going to tell them how much I love it. And then I'm going to maybe see if I can wrangle like a guest spot or something for like an episode later down the line. Cause I just felt, really, I was still very conflicted about the idea of playing this high school kid. And with a pilot, as everybody here knows, you literally, there's no way to know, where anything's going to go. And so, I went in and sat down. First time I read, it wasn't for Ryan. It was for Greer Shepard, who was another EP on the show. She was actually Michael's partner for many years. They might still be partnered. They produced a number of shows together. And I said to her, just like an absolute fool, I essentially what I said, oh, this is amazing. I'm not your Matt. I'm not the guy that you want to play this son. If you ever have a guest spot, I'd love to audition again. Thank you so much. And she very kindly, instead of telling me to go pound sand, which, I deserve, she very kindly said, well, why don't you just read and let us be the judge of that? And so I did. And what happened is that over the next bit of time, I think I read for the show, I could be anywhere from like 5 to 7 times. And I found myself every time wanting to be a part of this thing more and more, because sort of throughout that audition process, you start to glean little bits of the people on the other side of the table. And you kind of, it's all highly presumptive, but you start to gather things about it, and you think, oh, this has an interesting energy to it. And then, fortunately, for reasons unknown, they asked me to come and be a part of it. And it was and those initial days, we shot the pilot down in San Diego, and that was actually a really magical time because like everybody on the show, I got this, and again, this is just totally my thing, and then I'll shut up. I'm talking way too much about this, but there was just like an energy of almost like firsts, like there were so many people on that set that had like long resumes, and sort of from all departments working on that show. But there was just like an energy about it to me to where no matter if you were coming to the table with a career's worth of work behind you, or if you were somebody like me who hadn't done much, that just had this feeling of, oh, this is an interesting thing that we all get to be a part of. And I got in that newness of that interesting thing was, I found it to be really infectious, sort of throughout the shooting of the pilot. That first season was really kind of magical in a lot of ways because it was just there was just a newness to it, like internally, everybody was sort of, I think, a little happily like beside themselves that, oh, this is kind of why I got into this stuff, was to do something like this, and that was a really lovely feeling, to get to have that.
And it's also that level of television at the time as well, right? They were sort of going into this new era of television. Sort of cable shows were becoming king. We were still very much a network landscape. And nowadays, obviously, it's kind of the opposite. But Nip Tuck was one of those shows that really did set the bar when it came to that one. I wanted to touch on one thing. It's an interesting, I think, transition into Paula when you came into the show, because obviously with what John and Robert and Ruth are saying there about the pilot, season 5 in a way was almost kind of like a bit of a reboot for the show in many aspects. The show moved to LA. There was a whole other bunch of elements to it. There was a lot of changes going around when it came to the show that ultimately would lead to its penultimate season. Was that ever kind of sold in a way kind of to you that it's a bit of a reboot, or did you kind of see that as a bit of a way kind of when you came into it at all playing Kate?
I didn't really. I just watched it. I was a fan of the show. And any opportunity, again, like I said before about doing a recurring is kind of a big deal. The show's on the air. You can do one and done, but this was, and you never know. You do a good job. Californication, my one episode turned into 10. Sometimes that happens. And that's great. But no, I knew everyone, I remember you were saying something about the pilot and no one knew what they were doing. Oh, everyone knew what they were doing. I mean, people were very confident. You could feel it. I was nervous. I was nervous with Dylan. I was nervous with everybody. And then there's like Bradley Cooper was on my episode. I remember going to lunch with Bradley, and Bradley was doing a lot of movies. He really didn't do television, but again, it wasn't regular television. I remember saying, Bradley, like, why are you doing TV? And he goes, let me tell you one thing. We were at lunch at Osteria La Mama over on Melrose, I guess right across from where we were shooting, Paramount. And I said, why are you doing this? And he goes, I just finished a movie called Something About, or All About Steve, or Something About Steve. And he goes, guess who I played? I'm like, Steve? And he goes, yeah. Guess how much I got? Like hardly anything. I think it was like Sandra Bullock. Anyway, I don't know why I went off on that, but you had like these amazing people. You had Bradley Cooper on the show, and I got to work with him. And that was really fun.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up with the guest stars, because that was definitely one of the questions that I was going to ask you about Bradley. But I mean, for each of the other people on the show, just in terms of some of the people that you were sharing, Ruth, you talk about your last scene. You got to sing with Burt Bacharach. I mean, how's that? How does that come about when you read that in the script, and there you are sharing the screen with Burt?
That turned into an iconic scene.
Yeah.
I got a phone. I was working up at the O'Neill conference, the Eugene O'Neill conference in Connecticut. I was working on a play that I'd written, and I was workshopping it. And I get a phone call from Ryan Murphy, and he says, "Hello, darling. I have good news and bad news." And I said, "Oh dear. Well, what's the bad news?" He said, "We're killing you off." I said, "Well, that's really bad news. I'm very, very sad to hear that. what's the good news? I said, you're going to sing with Burt Bacharach in your final scene. So it was great. And Burt Bacharach was, first of all, he was so tiny. I remember seeing him come in the room with Julian, who was very tall. And Burt would look like this tiny, tiny little man next to him. And he was such a groovy cat. He was like a jazz cat, you know? He was like, yeah, your phrasing's really nice. Thanks. He was just so cool and sweet.
What did you sing? Do you remember what you sang?
Yeah, I sang "The Spell's in Love with You" that he wrote, you know. I used to say, the sky's in love with you.
There goes that next question. I was going to ask if you wanted to give us a rendition of it today.
No,
we haven't prepped you. Completely. Everyone tune in. We've got it's karaoke session that way. Robert, yourself.
It's on YouTube though, and people are always saying, "Do you know you're on YouTube?" I'm like, "Yeah, I know it's on YouTube."
Surprised it wasn't released on like iTunes or something like that as sort of like a duet, that kind of a newer version with that. Robert, I mean, one that I wanted to call out for you in that pilot episode, Raymond Cruz, who obviously has gone on to lots of things. A lot of people probably know him more so of Breaking Bad these days as well. But, you know, working with someone like that and some of the other sort of the guest stars that you got to work alongside with?
Yeah. Oh. Me?
So for Robert, sorry.
Oh, Robert, I'm sorry.
You can talk about Raymond Cruz as well if you want to, Ruth, by all means, please.
Well, I remember a scene. I can't remember what season it was. I think it was season 4. And Raymond and I, we had this scene to do. And I remember sitting for 3 hours with the Bermans, the special effects company that did the makeup for Escobar, when Ryan Murphy brought the character back to life, literally resurrected him, so to speak. And I remember them doing this really very detailed, astonishing Frankenstein type face with staples on it.
Yeah.
And I remember when Escobar was in the hospital and the Raymond Cruz character came to see him. And I remember when Escobar had to take the bandage off and he asked Raymond's character, you know, what do you think? And I remember how Raymond played that. He did not want to offend the likes of Escobar because he was such a sociopath. And so he basically told him that he looked very macho. And I just remember that was a lot of fun, that particular day. And the reveal, because, you know, usually when you look at these things, the subjective tendency is to look at yourself, this idea of what you are as an actor or personality, however you perceive yourself. So when you look in the mirror and there's no reference point for the identity because they put a mask on the face and there's no recognition of Robert. There's just this monster staring back. I thought that was fascinating. And I think Raymond and I both enjoyed that particular scene together because of how monstrous the visual effects suggested, you know, where Escobar was going psychologically, and in fact, inevitably he would escape from that hospital bed and you'd see the handcuffs left there and this ominous music playing. So I remember that sequence with Raymond more than anything else because of how it affected me when I watched it.
And then left, of course, his character's body with his brains blown out on the couch of Sean when he came home to discover that. Of course, as getting rid of the evidence. John, I mean, I know in our interview with you a couple of years ago, we talked a lot about sort of who you worked alongside with, but I've got to mention Famke. I mean, come on, can we not just mention Famke Janssen? You obviously got to share a lot of great scenes with her, ultimately walk off into the sunset with Ava Moore, her character, of course.
That's
I mean, can you share anything around the iconic Famke Janssen and getting to share some amazing scenes with her?
No, I mean, I think. I mean, I'll tell you, my strongest memory of working with her, it was just her. Because you mentioned earlier, it's like the people that would come in and do that's and not to. Who was it that said it? It might have been actually Ryan that said this. I'm not sure who said it, but I think it was probably Ryan or maybe it was somebody who actually wrote about the show, but they basically said that Nip Tuck was like the new Love Boat, that it's really the people who come in and work on the show, you know, and sort of have their arcs and then move on. Like that's what makes the show. And it was always, and I promise you, I'm getting to the.
You fit in very well on this show, John. This is what we do.
It was always, there was always a buzz about like who's doing the show, you know, like there, but we didn't do table reads on the show, and so we, I could be wrong, but I think the only table read that we did was literally on the pilot. So you never knew.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I so you never knew. Like I remember going to craft service one day and like Larry Hagman's standing there, and I was Larry Hagman, like, what are you doing here? You know, and it was really like that. It was really cool. So when she came on the show, I'm trying to, you know, it's been a number of years, honestly, and it's a little, I don't want to misrepresent the way it all went down, but I believe the way it unfolded is she had agreed to do the show, and I think Ryan is the one that told me. And I mean, I was for sure like I thought, my God, that's an incredible get. And then when she came on, and everybody on here can relate to this. It's like when you have someone new too, and you know, you don't. It's there's so many unknowns, and so you don't. You know, my sort of mode of operating is I tend to like, hopefully politely without being standoffish, like stay back a little bit just to allow whoever's there to, you know, sort of find their, you know, make their own home, as it were, you know. But she came in and she was so cool. She was just so cool and so game. Like there was a real like worker among worker vibe that she brought to the show. And it was lovely. And it's not that I expected anything different. I didn't know her, but it's always just a pleasant encounter, you know, when someone just shows up and they're ready to rock and they're just of like sort of instantly integrated into the fabric of the thing, you know, and which makes sense. I mean, she'd obviously done so much, you know, before then, and then, you know, so I imagine she feels comfortable in all kinds of situations. And then sort of jumping forward when it was so interesting, you know, because then when they, you know, the big reveal about Ava, you know, in fact, man, it was like, I remember Ryan coming to me and he was like, I don't know how she's going to take this. He was like, she has no idea. She has no idea. And I was kind of thinking.
She had no idea, John?
That she had no idea. She had no idea. They never once told her. And maybe they didn't know, but they never once told her this is where your character's going.
Huh.
And
Oh
yeah, I know. And so, but that's the thing that really stuck to me about Fonka, because she literally, like, it was as though they told her, hey, do you mind wearing like the cream colored blouse instead of the black blouse? Like, she was just like, cool. All right. And it's like nothing. And I remember Ryan kind of vaguely thinking that a huge bomb might go, you know, it's like, are we going to lose? Like, is she going to come back? Because I think, I don't know where she lives these days, but I think at the time she was in New York. So it was like, you know, it's this whole thing of like, this could really go sideways. And when they told her, I mean, it was literally as nothing could be, you know?
So chill. Wow.
Yeah. So chill. Yeah. So she was lovely. She was really great. And it's always such a, you know, I mean, I've been very, very fortunate in that, you know, you hear so many, which I know are true, and I've had a few of those, but you hear so many stories about sort of tricky work situations, you know, just amongst cast and actors and all that stuff. And I feel really blessed, man. Like I've had far more just pleasant experiences than not. It makes the ones that aren't stand out a lot more. I will admit that, but I'd say for the run of the show, I mean, at least in my experience, you know, I mean, other people may have other, but I feel it's so funny, Robert, listening to you talk too. I was thinking about you and Raymond, and God, man, it was just that, like, those times there was such like a root. I was unaware, and this kind of goes back to what you were saying too about kind of not knowing when you're in the moment of what something is. It's like you all in many ways, like you and Raymond, and it's weird how you have these anchor points of memory, you know, and it like, it's like, that's like, it's just really, it's sort of interesting to be sitting here right now talking to you all, because things are, as we're talking, are like flooding back to me, you know, it's almost like, it's very strange. It's like clouds are sort of parting, and it's like, oh, right. Oh, yeah. You know, it's very interesting.
I gotta say, I think the reason Ryan was so successful in getting like anybody he wanted to be on the show was that everybody had a remarkable arc.
Yeah.
I don't care who you were. If you were a guest star on that show, man, you had an arc. Even if it was for one episode, man, it was a good arc. And
usually guest stars usually don't get that lucky.
No.
Just
and
kind of save things for everybody else.
Exactly. That's why I think this was so magical. I mean, certainly for me, it was a banquet, you know.
Well, I think it's a case of we worked out the amount of... No, go ahead. Please go ahead, Robert.
Yeah, I think it also speaks to the brilliance, don't you think, ladies and gentlemen, of the writing team, and how they flesh these characters out, where some of the stuff these days is so trivialized. They marginalize characters. They don't really develop, or they play a culturism or a political phenomenon. I don't think Ryan messed around with that too much.
No.
I'm with you. Yeah, I agree.
And there's a lot of it still that even 20 years later holds up very well. Some of the topics that were covered in a period of television and society that these topics weren't being talked about. I mean, John...
It was a transitional point, man. Let's face it, it was a transitional point. Whether people knew it or not, unconsciously, it definitely paved the way for so many people to explore aspects of their physical body, their idea of identity and all that stuff, spiritually, psychically, whatever you want to call it. I think it opened the floodgates to that. If I can be so bold.
I remember as a viewer, and before I did my guest spot, I was like shocked at what they were allowed to do on these shows. This is not normal TV. So it started something.
And that's the thing.
No.
You touched on...
I have a story, Ben. Can I just throw this out here?
Please, I want to hear it.
It speaks to what John was talking about the actress who's like, how is she going to take this? And I remember Ryan coming into my trailer, and I was talking to him an idea I had about the pilot. I don't know. Actually, I don't know if it was I don't know what episode. I think it was the first season. And there's a sequence, I think, when Escobar has sex with this woman. And I suggested, after doing a very in-depth character analysis, that it made more sense for the positioning of the woman to be more, speaking to Escobar's tendency, to be not the missionary position, but to be something less intimate, and have her turn around. And he said, well, thanks, Robert. Now I have to go tell this young lady that she's got to do this. And he was laughing and thought it was kind of funny. But I remember just stuff like that coming up. You know, if you're going to open that door and let us play, so to speak, then, you know, you start playing jazz, I guess, with some of these scenarios. And if you really want to authenticate a character like Escobar, which is this kind of, you know, very smart but also sadistic, kind of slimy guy, then, you know, if you open that door, you got to go in that room and really be in that room. And I remember Jolie Richardson saying to me, it was ironic too, because we did a sequence, it was a kind of like I don't know if it was a dream sequence type thing, where Escobar's character had all these women lining up, and he was, you know, basically having sex with them one after the other. And I remember her coming up to me saying, this is probably more difficult for you than anybody else. And you know what? She was right. It was really weird, man. It was the closest thing with respect to the show and Ryan's genius. I felt like we were teeter-tottering from brilliance on one side and then pornography right there, but we didn't push it over the edge. It was there, but not so much. Just enough to unsettle my being, man, as an artist, to go, wow, I'm really taking my clothes off, you know, spiritually, and allowing this frequency to move through me and becoming this beast. And I think Miss Richardson was so sensitive to that process, and she saw where I had to go, that she was kind enough to, you know, bestow some humanity in between takes so that I wouldn't lose my mind in this character.
Wow, wow. It's so fascinating to hear that. I mean, Paul, you touched a little bit on that, didn't you? Sort of about when you auditioned for it and kind of, getting out of that level. I mean, was Ryan somebody who was able to help you along with those sort of scenes to kind of help you as an actress kind of get into that zone where you can maybe overcome that a little bit?
Of course, he completely understood how vain I was and what I was willing to do. I appreciate that when you do have a sex scene, it's very strange and awkward, and most of the time not romantic, unless you're kissing. Kissing's always fun for me. But the set was always, Nip Tuck it felt very protected, and I always felt very safe. And even I don't think I had sex in the show, but I certainly had to like take my clothes off and show, the uncomfortableness in between when you finish filming and they yell cut. Usually I'm talking football, just to kind of break it up so you can't think too hard about it. I remember I asked David Duchovny, different show, what his favorite football team was in between having sex from behind. Right. And then they're okay, we're rolling again. All right, here we go. I mean, it's just the weirdest thing you do. I wish and it's always a closed set. I'm sure yours was too. But it's odd what we do.
Yes. Very much.
Wow.
Odd.
I'm never going to watch a sex scene in a movie ever again the same way.
Yeah.
I'm just going to be like, who's their favorite football team now? I
I'm
wonder.
Sorry.
No, thank you. It's interesting.
That's a
I
really
think the viewer
interesting.
benefits more than anybody else.
I think, yeah, for sure. I never felt like anytime I had to had a scene like that on the show, that it was always so weird because everybody here knows it. I mean, I'm not saying anything that you all don't know, but yeah, it's very. I remember one in particular. I've just never forgotten this because I remember thinking, no, because I remember the director came up to me, and it was obviously a sex scene, and he literally came up and he was like, and by the way, I did not know this young lady at all. It's like we had literally just met in the makeup trailer, and here we are, and and we're all professionals and stuff. And obviously the crew on Nip Tuck was phenomenal. As a matter of fact, Kelly Carlson used to always say that she was like, at some point, a group of us, she used to say this during the run of the show. She's like, she's like, we should open like a school for like how to do these scenes. She was like, because we all have to do them, and nobody, she's like, I don't know about you, but like nobody ever sat me down and was like, this is how you do it. She was like, I just had to learn like on set, and that was very much my experience. And I remember the director coming up to me, and he didn't know how to say. He goes, "Can you just like go harder?" And I was like, I don't know. It was like one moment where like I was like, I don't know this person. Like it was just weird, right? It was like this. It really caught me out because and very fortunately she was much more professional than I was, and she was like, it's perfectly okay, blah blah blah. But I just remember thinking, God, what a strange reality, that this guy's just like creeping up with cans around his neck, and he's like, can you just and it was I've never forgotten that moment because it was like one of those like snapshot moments of like this is my job today. All right, here we go.
Now they have intimacy coordinators, which I find even more uncomfortable. Like, okay. I don't know. I understand it.
I've heard of it. Yeah.
It's although I don't think I've had to have sex on TV for quite a long time, thank God. But yeah, they have them. I mean, are you okay if he's going to touch you here and then you're like, all right, okay. It's so silly. And yet it does. It protects the girls that, are really uncomfortable. And, I'm sure Ruth in your day and my heyday, certain people have taken advantage and you're like, oh, that was uncomfortable. I wish you didn't do that. We didn't rehearse that. Usually I just say, this is what I'm going to do. And are you okay with that? And how about, and just really make it light and fun. And then they start rolling and then you go for it. And then you cut and you talk about football. But yeah.
Yeah, that was actually always my thing too. I would always try to find the person and similarly, I don't think I've had any, oh no, I guess maybe I have once, but I haven't had many intimate scenes since Nip Tuck, but I would always try to find the other actor and go just like literally be like, hey, you know, not even like, hey, are you comfortable, but just like, hey, I'm not a scumbag. You know what I mean? Like, you know, like in a very subtle way, just be like, hey, you know, like, isn't this weird? You know.
Can I ask on that? Just the one Ruth talking about all this topic that we're on. Very famous scene with Mrs. Grubman where she basically tries to bed Christian Julian.
Well, she doesn't get very far.
She doesn't get. Yeah.
Crying about her dead husband.
Yeah. What was that scene? I mean, like you talked about that chemistry with Julian. I mean, how does that go? And like, do you talk about football with him offset just as you're sort of calling him to get into bed with you?
No, because we really didn't do that. It was not a very sexual. I mean, it was a
Half and
sweet
half.
scene. It wasn't a sexual.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a fun day at work for me. I got to watch Julian take his clothes off about 5 times, and that was fun. And then he, you know, gets in bed with me and he starts to stroke me, and I start to cry. And it's because I miss my husband, and that comes out. And so because it was such an emotional scene for me, we kind of kept it, you know, quiet between takes. And but that was a very special day for me. I liked that scene a lot. I thought it played really well, and it's so sweet the way the camera pulled back on us as we just held each other when he said everything's going to be all right.
It's one of those ones that you touched on before about how
very
kind of
sweet, really beautiful direction.
Yeah, they kind of paralleled each other.
Ryan directed that. Yeah, Ryan directed that one. It was stunning. It was really a beautiful.
Completely
episode.
agree. Was a great scene. I just on that, while we're talking about Julian and also, of course, Dylan, obviously all of you shared variety of scenes of them, but I'd love to maybe get a fun story from each of you about either Julian or Dylan or both of them. I mean, I might start with you, John, because I'm going to say you probably shared the majority of screen time with them, stabbing them with needle, getting punched by them. I mean, God, look, where does it go on? There's plenty of things that happen to you from both Christian and Sean there, but any fun stories or memories from either of them that come to mind?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of stories, a lot of I mean, again, it's like that thing to where you're sort of looking back over a period of time, and it's also for me, and I don't know why, but it's so fragmented, you know, those years on that show, because it was I guess at the end of the day, it was like 7 years, you know, of working on that show. And so it's, you just pick little parts out. I mean, what I will say, and this may not be very fun for your viewers and listeners, but it blew me away. It always blew me away, man. And maybe somebody here will have a different story about him that sort of contradicts what I'm about to say. But, you know, Dylan Walsh was #1 on the call sheet on that show. And I never once in 7 years, not once, did he come to set with sides in his hand. And I remember always being fascinated by that, because I didn't even have a 10th of like the workload that he or Julian had. And I was clutching those things like a baby's, blanket. You know what I mean? It was such a security blanket for me. And it always blew me away that Dylan would show up just ready to go, like no matter how late he had worked the night before. And he was, Dylan, I'm almost going to get emotional talking about it, because I adore Dylan. I really do. Dylan, he was like and again, I'm just speaking purely from my experience, right? But it's like, man, there was a lot of stuff on that show, man. There was a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff. And he was the best of us. Like, he really was. He was able to display a quiet professionalism. And there were times in the show, like, very sincerely, and I'm not, not to air anything out, but I mean, like all shows go through this. If you're on a show long enough, like, there's going moments where things start to fray. And things get out of whack, and maybe the band doesn't stay together next year. And, Nip Tuck was no different in that. It's a very cliched trajectory in a lot of ways. And I don't mean that to be dismissive of it. I just mean, anybody hearing or listening or seeing this will understand that everything has that sort of thing to it. And we were no different, but man, Dylan he was always just right there, you know, like he just was so, I really always enjoyed our time together and getting to know him personally outside of the show. And Julian, you know, he was such a character in many ways, like obviously as Christian, but then also off the show, he had this really uncanny ability to, and again, just from my perspective, like it was just interesting seeing the two guys who had at least amongst the cast, obviously had the biggest workload, but to see the way that they managed it in such radically different ways. Like Dylan just sort of stayed the course almost like a soldier. He was going from trench to trench. I never saw him, like, I just personally never saw him out of whack or anything like that. And Julian had this uncanny ability to just brush it off like water off a duck's back. Like he just sort of come in like broad shouldered and big. And then, you know, and then when it was all said and done, it was almost as though as soon as it was there, it was gone. And he was just right as rain as he was driving off into the sunset, you know, and there's so much so that, I actually really enjoyed working with Julian a lot throughout the years. He's a big sort of, or at least he was in those days, like a big personality. But I really liked it. I liked having that to sort of I don't mean this in like an antagonistic way, but just like in a way, like I liked having that to stand against, you know, I like that sort of whatever buttress would be created sort of between that. And I really enjoyed that. And it's funny because I text with Dylan maybe once every 6 months, just like literally how you doing? I hope all is well. I hadn't spoken to Julian in years. And the other day, I mean, quite literally the other day, I ran into him at like a coffee shop, like outside LA, like just random small little coffee shop.
Hi, Dad.
It was kind of like that. Like I was with a good friend of mine and I was standing there and I remember, and by the way, this is in no way, shape or form a reflection on Julian. This is just, again, it's like, it's so many years ago now, you know, but I was like, oh, it'll be hilarious. Let's see if this guy even recognizes me. And then, and I just stood there and said nothing. And as he turned around with his coffee, he just sort of stopped dead in his tracks. And it turned into a 4-hour conversation. We just sat outside and talked, and it was incredible, you know. And since that time, Julian and I have actually been in very regular touch, and it's been so lovely. It's been incredible to reconnect with him. So and I'm sorry, I know I'm rambling again, but it's just going down memory lane. It's kind of blowing my mind. So funny story. I mean, God, there were so many, you know. I mean, I wouldn't even know where to begin. And then, but just in terms of
John,
yeah,
can I speak to that point for a second? Because
please, yeah,
you were afforded this intimacy that I barely scratched the surface of. But the cool thing about it is that, and how many seasons did the show go?
6.
7?
6.
6? Okay. So I remember the last episode that the character Escobar appeared on. And ironically, it was with Dylan and Julian in the car.
Yep.
And there was a song, I forget the band, the 80s band, sing. I think the lyrics were something like,
Drive.
You can't go on. Yeah, you tried. You can't go on. It's like as if nothing's wrong. What's the lyric? You can't go on.
Yep.
Thinking nothing's wrong. Okay, so I remember that, and every artist, performer knows that sooner or later, I don't care what station you found yourself with the blessing or the curse of the final curtain inevitably coming. And I think everyone realized in that episode or in that season that the show was ending, right? And I remember feeling kind of melancholy about it. And I remember saying something out of character in reference to feeling that. And I got the sense from Dylan and from Julian that they were struggling. And I wasn't sure why. So I just said something. I think one of the ADs asked me, how you doing, Robert? You need anything? I said, no, man, I just want to hang myself. And then Dylan said, I'm with Robert. What do you mean? I want to hang myself. And Julian said, yeah, me too. And we all just started laughing because we realized that the final curtain was coming and it was over. And that was and to me, for them to say, to be, because they're celebrities, right? And for them to be candid like that and cue from me that way and be honest was the greatest compliment, and felt so endearing to me, because I wasn't alone in it. That none of us were impervious to the final curtain, man. It was over. We all knew it.
Great story. Love that. Paula, I want to touch on you just quickly with that question, because I guess out of everybody on the show, you obviously only in the one season, sort of a more in a condensed time, and a lot of those scenes were more so with Dylan. But anything that particularly stands out to you?
He's a very good kisser.
Hey, there we go.
After the Emmys, I'm allowed to say that.
Yes.
After the Emmys, where I think I said something like, "Oh, Mariska Hargitay won another one," and Mariska and I knew each other back in the day, so that was funny. And then he kissed me. It was like a really good kiss. Him and Jason Bateman, very close tie.
Good to know. All right.
Good kissers. He was just lovely to work with. It's true. I really was just me and Dylan. I ran into him not too long ago around Lake Hollywood and scared the shit out of him. But he was a sweet guy. He was nice. Again, being the guest star that comes in to this established, amazing show, they were very welcoming. And did I kill the show? Was I the show killer for that? Because God knows.
No, I don't. We won't get. How long do we have?
One more season after?
There was one more season. I mean, season 5 was that weird one where it sort of split after. So, yes.
It wasn't me, but I had a great time. It was Dylan was amazing.
Paula, you're about to head off, and we're going to close this off in just a moment anyway. But just one quick thing before you go, Paula. What are you up to now? How's life? Update just for the fans who kind of want to hear the life of Paula Marshall right now in 2023?
Well, right now we're having a pool party. So I have to get the drinks going, and I'm waiting for Euphoria season 3. Hopefully, I'm going to strike on Monday, so I'm going to get out to the picket line. Hopefully it won't last too long. I'm waiting to see if Marsha is even going to be in season 3, because we don't know, Writers, Sam Levinson is a creative genius. I think he probably watched Nip Tuck and got some inspiration because it's on the same level. It's an amazing show. Nip Tuck was an amazing show. And so I'm waiting to see if that character continues there. And besides that, just being a mom. My daughter's going off to college next year.
Wow.
So that's what I'm doing. Yeah.
Well, it sounds like it's all going, and we'll keep an eye out for that. But Paul, we appreciate your time joining us here on the show to celebrate the legacy. So go swim, please. Go have a couple of martinis by the pool. And we appreciate your time on the show.
Guys. It was such a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Ruth, I'll just touch with you just on what we're talking about there. I mean, obviously you've talked a little bit about Julian, but anything else to add just in terms of fun stories with either Julian or Dylan?
Well, let's see. There was the episode where I dragged in my boyfriend or fiance, and I wanted a vaginal rejuvenation, and I wanted my boyfriend to have a scrotal tuck. Mm-hmm. And Dr. Troy says to me, "Why on earth are you doing this?" And I said, "Because when you strip us naked and stand us next to each other, we look like the pit and the pendulum." That was funny, right? Anyway, so in this scene, I had a scene where I had to be lying on a table with my feet in stirrups and, my legs sticking up, and Julian is between my legs talking to me, looking at my vagina, or as Mrs. Grubman would have said, vaginal rejuvenation. She was so crass. She was so horrible. Anyway, that day, as I spent the day on my back with, in between my legs, he was so sensitive because I was sort of horrified, and he was so sensitive and dear and funny and cracking jokes, and because we had a great friendship, Julian and I, we really got along well, and it was probably because I had a massive crush on him. I was just...
Who doesn't?
I had a insane crush on him. And of course, I'm sure he knew it. and that tickled him to no end. So it was just a fun relationship we had. So
Good to hear. Good to hear.
and that day with him between my legs, it was very very bonded. Very bonding.
If you're not going to bond then, when are you going to bond?
Exactly.
I think that's a pretty good way to bond. Before we close out, one thing I just wanted to touch on with you, John, really quickly. Now, when we had you on the show a few years ago, and when we covered all 100 episodes, we like to kind of go on this notion of the hashtag poor Matt, right? Like all the bad things or the unlucky things and everything. Now, when I did my little speed rewatch in the last month, I could have counted how many women Christian slept with. I could have counted how many surgeries were done. I could have counted how many deaths. No, I counted the amount of hashtag poor Matt moments there were. Do you want to give me a rough idea of how many bad things or bad luck things happened to Matt McNamara over 100 episodes of Nip Tuck?
Okay. So you actually want me to guess a number?
Just give me a ballpark number, and I'll tell you if you're even close.
Let me preface it briefly by saying this. I will say very sincerely, from about season 2 until the last season, I was really waiting for that script that said Matt ends it all. Like, I thought, this kid, there's no way he's going, like, it's coming. And so there was to the poor Matt of it all, there was always in my mind, I was like, for sure, this is how they're going to send Matt off, and really up until the final episode, actually, I thought. I just can't think. I thought, well, this kid, like, basically when he left with Ava at the end, I was like, well, he'll either become, like, you can follow his trajectory. Like, either he's gonna, I think they went to Paris or something.
Yeah.
Like, either he's gonna die in Paris or he's going to evolve and essentially become enlightened. Like he'll become
join Scientology again. I mean, he did it once, right? Like,
yeah, well, that's right. There's something, that he'll sort of come back, so if I had to get so the numbers got to be pretty high.
Oh yeah.
I forgot how many episodes I was in. Did you say it was
you're in
something
65? Like you're in 65.
65. So I'm gonna the number that's coming to my mind, which I'm actually intentionally going over, but I'm gonna say 67.
Not even close, my friend. I counted 142.
Okay, cool.
No, I'm not going to go through all of them.
All horrible things that happened to poor Matt, right?
So we're talking trying to chop his own penis off, sleeps with his own sister, becomes a mime robber, needs to get breast implants in surgery because his prison bitch wants to feel some boobs.
I totally forgot about that, dude. Oh my God. I got a story about that one. That's
all right.
funny.
Give it to us.
Well, no, I mean, it's not. I mean, it's just that guy, Patrick Kilpatrick, that actor who was really nice guy, but he's a hulk of a man, right? And I remember it was oh my God, I would have lived the rest of my life and forgotten that my character was forced to wear a bra in prison. I swear I would have forgotten that.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thanks. It's like my daughter, by the way, my 11-year-old daughter's in another room in this place that we're staying, this Airbnb that we're in. She's never seen anything that I've been in because she can't, and it's in the very, very rare moment where somebody might, be very nice and say something to me. She's always like, just like, oh, so you actually were like an actor? Like, you do that? I was like, yeah. And it's because it's like, so she's not, I haven't shown her anything. Anyway, sorry. So, I'm glad you're here, Ben, or else those things would just lost in my mind.
I'm just letting you talk. I'm loving these tangents. Again, you fit very well on the Oz Network. It's great.
I said John Scott, who was directing that episode, he started on Nip Tuck as a camera operator, and then he started directing episodes. And Patrick was really like like really doing his version of like a real method thing, to where like he was getting like loud and he was hopping and popping and like going in the cell and like doing all this stuff. And he was, I'm not exaggerating, he was bare minimum twice my size. And I jokingly said to John Scott, I said, hey, have you ever seen Team America? And he was like, yeah. He's like, it's one of my favorite movies. I was like, if you see me doing this in the camera, like call cut, because this guy's killing me. And he's like, oh, and then we go in and take one, and dude, he just takes a hold of me and slams me and starts punching me, and I literally look at the camera. He's punching me in my chest. In his defense, he's not hitting my head, but like I look and that like I am half joke, like, but I mean literally like I got claw marks, like literal claw marks down my neck, because he's just like grabbing him. And so I look at the camera and do this. And as this guy's like wringing my neck and throwing me around, I hear John Scott be like, Hensley, look at Hensley, because he thinks I'm kidding. And meanwhile, I was like imagining my head just getting popped off and like chucked over the wall. And it was
oh my God.
No,
Wow.
It was great. It ended up being great. And I have to say, to Patrick's credit, it played really well, and he did like everything right for that scene. But that was at a point in the show where, you know, you're like, to say jaded is the wrong word, but you're kind of like, you think you know how everything's gonna go. You think you know, like, because it's like you've been there for a couple of years, you think you know. And then that also kind of speaks to what we were talking about earlier about the beauty of the people who would come into the show and really bring what they had to bring to the table. Because then along comes a dude who's like, yeah, not today. Like today we're gonna act a little. Like today we're gonna do it, you know. And it was I've totally forgot about that bra thing. So anyway, then I will say this about it. It was very funny. And I wish he were on this, because I'd be like, but he I remember when it came time for me to kill him, because I kill him with the bra. Mm-hmm. And after he gets done beating me up for whatever 2.5 hours, he's like, hey, go when you do the bra, go easy on that. Like, all right. And then I that thing, I was like, this bra's gonna snap, son. And I went and got a thick neck. He was fine, but it was just very funny. I was like, oh, I get mine, you know. That ended up being a fun day. Everybody got a laugh that day, because they were like, I remember Erin Kruger, who did makeup on the show. She was head of the makeup department. She literally, as she was covering the scratches on my neck between takes, she'd be like, are you okay? And I was like, I think I'm all right. Be all right.
Wow.
Anyway, the bra, you really triggered a real memory. That was actually one of the more like physical memories I have of that show. But yeah, so that's a lot of poor Matts, and that was.
I'll send you the list if you like once we finish this. I think the mime. We talked about the mime storyline, but I mean, when you go full mime, you maybe.
That's what made me think of my daughter. So today, I took her to see. Where we are is literally across a parking lot from a great local movie theater here in Louisville, Kentucky, and we went and saw Wes Anderson's new film, Asteroid City. She loves Wes Anderson. I love Wes Anderson, and they ran this mime commercial, and I literally said to her today, it must be because I knew I was coming on here. I was like, your dad played a mime. I played this guy called the Mime Bandit, and I had to learn how to be a mime.
Wow.
This poor child, she's just like, all right, like, can I get popcorn?
Only if you mime it with me on the way there.
I literally saw a mime today on screen.
It's not triggering for you, John? Every time you see a mime, like, oh no.
I remember feeling very self-conscious wearing, it's weird, like a show where you have to often have no clothes on. I never felt more self-conscious than having that mime, like that low cut stripe thing and the little gray cropped vest. And I think I even maybe had a beret, if I'm not mistaken.
You did. Mm-hmm.
Just being out right at the Santa Monica Pier in that thing. It was just so. That was humiliating. I'm fairly certain Ryan did that to humiliate me. Like that was
Ben,
a good.
Ben, maybe a new wrinkle for the next show would be nip tuck. I don't know, rehab slash.
I'll get somebody I'll get a therapist on there. Tell me what you don't like about yourself. Go
For sure.
Is that the same with you, Robert? Every time you hear Cars by Gary Newman, you either get triggered or get like, well, I'm Escobar all of a sudden.
Guess what? When I was in the military, I sailed, I did a Westpac. I went overseas and I went to Australia. And that's the first, that was the 80s, right? So I was listening to Gary Newman and I was entranced with that song while I was doing my tour overseas. And I would listen to that song and I would just, you know how like when you listen to music, sometimes you make movies in your head, you just fantasize about things. And that song has been following me long before I met Ryan Murphy. So it was ironic to me that was my theme music in the show.
Fantastic.
Oh,
Wow. Every time I hear that song to this day, I think of your character on Nip Tuck. It just comes to mind straight away. It
cool
always
song,
does
man.
it. It's just, you're there. It's an amazing song. Guys, before we wrap this up, I'd love to get a personal update from you, each of you. But one question I just want to ask each of you, we'll go around the room here. I'll start with you, Robert. 20 years on, legacy of Nip Tuck. What do you think the legacy it had on television over the last 20 years?
I think your show demonstrates that, and the people who comment about it all these years later remind me. I don't know. I can't speak to that other than the input I get from others. So clearly, it's made an imprint in television history, which is very difficult. So I salute that.
Fantastic, Ruth.
well, I don't think there was anything even remotely like it on television when it came out, and I think it was, groundbreaking, and there was the sexual content was greater. They really pushed the envelope in that regard. But it was, and also I think the fact that it attracted so many of these remarkable guest stars, these big, big stars, it attracted so much talent. Because it was so special. And so I can't put my finger on what that special thing was. It was just a chemistry that happens, if you're lucky, once in a blue moon. And Nip Tuck had it. So
Great. Absolutely agree. John, I'll leave it final words there for yourself.
Oh gosh, I mean, I wouldn't know how to add much more. I think that really sums it up. I mean, it's in a weird way. And maybe this is a testament to any sort of show that's fortunate enough to have an impact. And it's also hard, and I'm sure maybe we all feel this way. I don't know. Like, it's always hard to comment on something that, I just got invited along for the ride. You know what I mean? Like, meaning I'm thankful that I got to be a part of it. And it's hard to, like, I don't feel any ownership of it in any way. I just very lucky, man. There are plenty of other, guys in that audition room that could have done the job every bit as good, if not better than I did, 100%. And it's really always a lovely surprise. Like when you reached out about this, it's pretty cool, man, that like 20 years after that show premiered, that it's, that we're here talking about it, and that, it was memorable for us, just to be a part of. And in terms of what it left behind, I mean, I can only hope that it and again, it's more a testament to the writers and all of those folks. I can only hope that it, maybe served in some way to, either as a point of inspiration or just to help push it along. Like I can say this, like Nip Tuck wouldn't have gotten its chance without The Shield. The Shield on FX is the one that, really cracked that. I mean, obviously radically different genre than Nip Tuck and all of that good stuff, but it was the Shield, and then they said yes to Ryan Greer and Michael, to bring Nip Tuck to the table. And I can only hope that maybe Nip Tuck was able to do that for, some other storytellers, that came afterwards.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So many
Another
different
thing I want to
things
mention is that I thought the production values in Nip Tuck were so extraordinarily good. It was
Yes.
beautiful to look at. It was because Ryan's eye is so good. It was just beautiful to look at. Every set was glorious. And I also want to compliment the extraordinary use of music.
Yes, 100%.
I don't know the fellow's name that chose the music. I mean, he was really good. That was some great music.
Well,
And
it's
Nip Tuck was
always
good.
that way, and Ryan Murphy's always kind of had that sort of throughout his career, hasn't it, about finding that perfect song to kind of mix with the scene.
On.
And I mean, absolutely agree, Ruth, and sort of touching what I was saying there to Robert about like Cars. I mean, there are so many songs from this show that will just instantly take me back to an episode of Nip Tuck. I can never listen to Rocket Man by Elton John ever again and not think of the suicide scene, in season 1, and sort of so many other iconic memories. I mean, Total Eclipse of the Heart now, John, I just think of poor old Matt burning himself alive while cooking meth.
Yes.
So
Yes. That's really funny.
Yeah.
That's
I
really
have
funny. What's that? Sorry.
I told Ryan Murphy that he had to use the Rolling Stones at some point.
Oh, and he used it plenty of times. I think he
did.
went through their entire catalog, didn't he?
Early on, I said, you got to get Stones music. It's really going to work for you. And I think he used Mother's Little Helper for one of my things. One of my
he was genius. He was genius in celebrating narcissism and making hell seem attractive. Because he dressed it so wonderfully and so festively that you'd want to go to hell because Ryan's hell was a good time.
That's like a beautiful way to put it, Robert. That's the thing. That's it. That's really interesting.
Good.
That's a great way of putting it. Yeah, so many ways of doing that, and just everything about it. We could easily chat here for another hour about it, but I'm going to wrap this up and thank you each individually. And please, on the way out, let us know, let our listeners and our viewers know what you're up to. If there's anything that we can see you in or anything along those lines, I'll start with you, Robert. Thank you so much for coming back on to celebrate this occasion. And please update. What are you up to now?
This October, Grindstone Lionsgate's releasing a film called Bloodthirst, vampire fantasy thing. Keep an eye out for that.
Definitely. Sounds exciting.
I
I like it. I like a good vampire movie. So I'm on board. Ruth, to you, thank you so much for appearing. It's such an honor to chat to you and to hear your stories and everything that. And yeah, can we see you in anything coming up soon? What are you up to?
Not really. I haven't been working a lot because I actually had some orthopedic issues recently. So, but I'm coming back. But I do a lot of voiceover work, and I may be doing a play in Los Angeles that may be coming up. So
great.
Yeah.
Well, good luck, and hopefully all the health issues there are good.
Yeah,
and,
we're getting it. I'm getting it under control.
well, all our thoughts and fingers crossed and everything along those lines there too. John, yourself, thank you so much for coming back. I was, since we last talked to you, you did appear on another Ryan Murphy show. You were on a brief stint on 911 there, just for a brief little moment there. I was excited to see you on that. But anything else we can see you in coming up at all?
Nothing coming up, man. I spend a majority of my time these days actually writing.
Right.
And I'm actually right now working on actually a documentary film that I'm pretty excited about. But as with all those things, man, like it's an interesting topic and potentially controversial topic, but I'm very excited that they're giving me the opportunity to tell the story. So that's really what I'm devoting a majority of my time these days to.
Well, congratulations, John.
Congratulations indeed. Keep an eye out for that.
You.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
And to everyone,
yeah.
Well, we can come back to us, John. When it's down the line, we can help talk about it more as well.
It may not be your fair, Ben, but we'll see.
Ben, I'm telling you, support group, TikTok support group,
I think we've discovered this. This is like hey, and then we can film it And when people ask about a reboot, it's just literally the actors who are on Nip Tuck trying to come together.
We're in recovery.
Exactly.
We just didn't know it. For 20 years, we've been in recovery. We just didn't know it.
Exactly.
There's something to that.
Yeah, I like it. I like it. Guys, seriously, it's such an honor to get you all together here to celebrate this occasion. So we appreciate your time here on the Oz Network today.
Ben, thank you so much.
Thank you, Ben. John, it's great seeing you, man.
Oh, my God. So good to see you, too, Ruth. So good to see you.
True.
Bye.
Now, for our YouTube viewers right now, before we let you go, we do have one additional actor here to celebrate the occasion of the 20th anniversary of Nip Tuck. John Schneider played porn producer Ram Peters in season 5. Unfortunately, couldn't attend live on the day of recording of this, but was still grateful enough to send us in a message to celebrate the occasion. Let's hear what John had to say.
Hey folks, John Schneider here. Ram Peters. I want to tell you that I talk about my experience on Nip Tuck all the time. It was a great, great experience. If I wasn't in Grand Isle, Louisiana, celebrating my wife's birthday, I would be on this show right now. But I do want to tell you that I appreciate the time that I spent there. For as amazingly raunchy a show that was aired to everybody, I often tell folks that the cast and crew were among the sweetest and nicest people that I've ever worked with. I think it's because the nature of the show was so wild and crazy that the nature of the cast and crew couldn't be, or we wouldn't get the work done. You know, it would just be crazy. But anyway, I had a wonderful time there. I hope you're having a wonderful time with this event tonight. Short story: if you remember my character, it was kind of wild because the woman that would later become my wife was running Robert Evans' office, which was right behind my dressing room. But we didn't meet. We met later and had a wonderful, wonderful life together. And I often brag on my time on Nip Tuck. So you take care, everybody from that show. Know that I love you, and you are a highlight of my life. You take care. Ram Peters signing out. Could have been Craven Moorhead. Wasn't. It was Ram Peters. I guess you had to bleep that out. Bye. Yeehaw.
And a big thanks to John there. Craven Moorhead. I like that character name. Maybe a little bit more than Ram Peters. A good Bond name in the future if Barbara or Michael want to use that. But appreciate John sending that video in to wish the 20th anniversary all the luck here. And it's been a big episode here. We do thank you for tuning in. Thanks to Ruth, thanks to John, thanks to Robert, thanks to Paula for their time. If you want to hear all of our Nip Tuck coverage that we have ever done in the history of the Oz Network, go to the oznetwork.net. We covered every single episode. Nick Chester and myself, all 100 episodes, we did a recap of. And we also got some great interviews on there. If you want to hear Robert's full interview that he did with us a couple of years ago, if you want to hear John's interview that he did with us a couple of years ago, as well as several other cast members from the show's history, they're all on there on the oznetwork.net. We are the only podcast in the history of podcasting that has covered Nip Tuck from start to finish, so you will get all that coverage there and more. And if you like what you hear, if you like what you've seen today, we have had other 20th anniversary reunion episodes in the past for TV shows that we've covered. Third Watch, 24, they're available online. You can also find them right here on YouTube as well as on our podcast channels. And please subscribe to our podcast wherever you get good podcasts from. Spotify, Stitcher, Apple, we're available on all of them. And mash that subscribe button right here on YouTube as well to never miss our videos as well. My name is Ben. This has been the Nip Tuck 20th anniversary special edition here on the Oz Network. And I'm going to close it out by once again saying, tell me what you don't like about yourself. Good night.